death, eternal punishment for anyone who opens this casket.
The mummy. Is it dead or alive? Human or inhuman? You'll know. You'll see. You'll feel the awful, creeping, crawling terror that stands your hair on end and brings a scream to your lips. There's nothing on earth like the mummy.
You will not remember what I show you now, and yet I shall awaken memories of love and crime and death.
Now I know his horrible plan. He is going to kill her and make her a living mummy like himself.
Horror Hounds, welcome to episode 13 of the Black Sunday Tapes Classic Horror, part 3 of our Universal Monsters series. A little bit later than planned, as I was a little bit under weather, but feeling much better now. Stuff happens, it happens. So, as I say, part 3 of our Universal Monsters series, and that can only mean one thing. I am, of course, talking about 1932's The Mummy. I believe this was the first time you had watched it, Michael?
It was 100% the first time that I'd seen it, and now it's the first 4 times that I've seen it.
Now it's the first 4 times you've seen it. So
yeah.
I think that goes without saying you enjoyed it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so let's kick off there, man. What did you like about it?
I mean, maybe the single biggest discovery I've had from this entire journey that we've taken here is, not just the Universal stuff, like the entire journey, is there is way more interesting camera work in a lot of older cinema than I realized.
Yeah.
Just like specifically in this one, when Ardith Bay is reading from the scroll, like the HD transfer was so clear I could see his reflection in the glass coffin.
Yes. Yeah.
And B, the way that the camera like just kind of glides around the coffin there. Like, I mean, Carl Freund invented the dolly shot. Like, come on.
He definitely brought it to... He was very famous for his moving camera shots, and when he shot Dracula, that was a massive thing in Dracula, was the moving camera. And I believe we even said about the opening of Dracula in the tombs, where that camera's moving in and, you know, it's tracking in and stuff. And yeah, Carl Freund was like really well known for that. So when he got his shot to direct, he was calling all the shots, man. He was. We'll get into his directing skills in a little bit, but because there's some interesting rumors around him. I don't know what's true and what's not, but there's some interesting rumors, let's say. But yeah, in terms of shooting,
I look forward to that. I didn't get into any of that.
The guy is the guy's a master. He's an absolute master of it, and you're completely right, man. This is such a stunning film. I think there's 3 things this film's got going for it, right? It's the camera work that's an absolute given. As Carl Freund, best part about Dracula, you know, from a filmmaking point of view, is the way Dracula is shot. It looks gorgeous. The obvious standout is Boris Karloff, you know, finally getting to show off some more acting chops rather than just playing the monster. And
I love the way that his whole face is frozen except for like his bottom jaw. That shit's rad.
Yeah, he's
I took so many notes about that. It's so rad.
Yeah, he's incredible in this. He's absolutely incredible. He really, really shows off, you know, why he kind of become a bit of a go-to actor for Universal at this point. You know, he done Frankenstein, obviously Bride, this, done a couple of other horrors with him, and yeah, absolutely outstanding on that point. And for me, the best part of this film is Jack Pierce's makeup. That the mummy makeup, it's a different level, man. Like Frankenstein is the most iconic.
Absolutely.
Frankenstein is the most iconic, but honestly, Imhotep may be better. like just from a makeup point of view,
There's
like the
just something about those
techniques and
wrinkles. Like I was like,
oh man,
how do we get these wrinkles?
oh man,
And I mean, and like apparently after Karloff saw the entirety of the makeup for the first time, like the only thing that he said was, well, you've forgotten to give me a fly.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
because he was so impressed with it, you know.
yeah.
So
He yeah, it was a very long, very painful process, but
eight
as
hours,
as
eight
we touched
hours.
on the Carlo, and that was just getting him in. That was just getting him in makeup, and then he had to go and shoot. Then they had to take it off. It was a near 24-hour day, to be honest. But
Yeah, I mean,
apparently
hence
Karloff kind of
he
loved
got
that.
into.
Yeah, he really, really liked it, man. It was. Do you know what? There's one thing. It's quite interesting if you ever read anything on Jack Pierce or um watch anything on Jack Pierce and people saying about you have the makeup artist, you have the guy that creates these legendary monsters, but he needs the actor to go with it. And possibly his two greatest creations are Frankenstein and the Mummy. And part of that was Karloff, because you needed an actor that would allow you to not only do their makeup, because back in the 1930s, you're coming out of silent cinema. Actors used to do their own makeup. There was no such thing as makeup artists, right? Like, actually, quite famously, even though Jack Pierce was the head of makeup at Universal at the time they made Dracula, he was very, very disappointed in Dracula because he didn't get to do the makeup because Bela Lugosi refused, because Bela Lugosi still wanted to do his makeup. So that's why he kind of went all out on Frankenstein, was because Karloff was like, no, come on, you do your thing. So you need that actor, you need that person that's willing to sit there and be tortured. And it was torture, the way they implied his makeup. But it's incredible, right? And I mean, you touched on it earlier, like HD. Never look better.
Oh my god, yeah.
Never look better. Really, really hasn't.
It's
What do you think of the overall story?
well, to be honest with you, like I didn't know anything going into this movie. So like when I sat down to watch it first time, as it opens, I was like, oh, right on. So it's just gonna be like the mummy menacing these three dudes, and then they're gonna get killed. Okay, cool. And then I'm like, 11 years later, y'all just ignored the mummy for 11 years?
Yeah,
What's
yeah,
what's happening in this movie? And so I just shut up and let it happen. And it was very different than I expected, but also like I don't know. I was really fascinated by a lot of the performances and what they were doing with the material, and like the woman was just a revelation to me. Like her some of her performances, like yeah, they're dated, but only a little. They're almost 100 years old, and they don't feel that over the top or dated to
yeah,
me.
yeah. Agreed,
Her
agreed.
specifically, like I mean, I guess spoilers. At the end when she's invoking Isis, I ran that back a couple. Like it was so full of genuine emotion that
Yeah,
it like hit me, and I ran it back a couple times every time I watched it. Like
Zeta Johan, the
there it
actress
is.
you're referring to, she is incredible in this, and she didn't make a lot of films. By the way,
No.
she made 6, 7, 8 films. That was it. Like she just she went. She done a lot of theatre work. She really loved the theatre, and she it's said that she believed she was probably a little too good for Hollywood,
Okay.
but the paycheck was 10 times bigger than the theatre. So
You think?
she done a few films. She done a few films, and as legend would have it, the only reason she done this is because she was under contract with Universal for another film, and she was paid for that film, but they didn't end up making it. She just had to honor her contract. But this really spoke to her because she was a very spiritual woman. She was a very she believed in a lot of reincarnation stuff that they tell during the story. So she really took to it, and I think you can see that, right? She's really genuine. You really feel her performance in it. So I think
A
she's a real
hundred percent.
heavyweight, man. I would have
Yeah.
loved to have seen her in some other stuff. So I touched on earlier about Carl Freund, amazing cinematographer, directorial debut, The Mummy, great directorial debut. However, there are a lot of rumors that some people will tell you they're fact, other people will tell you they're absolute nonsense, um, about his relationship with Zeta Johan, about how they had a very up and down relationship and it was his first feature and he's a little bit worried. Some people say we're the scapegoat, so he tried picking her. Other people say this is
She said that.
apparently
I
she
read it
said
from
that.
her mouth once or twice.
Well, apparently she said that. However, it all comes from biographies, right?
So I guess it could be hearsay. I thought I had read it was quoted to her
It,
specifically.
it
But
so it
uh,
is. This is where it gets really, really tricky.
Okay.
So
Okay.
this is why I wanted to bring this up quite early on, actually, because
Go for it.
it's one of the strangest things about this film is the behind the scenes are so goddamn complicated, because there's so many stories around it, and most people don't know if they're true or not. The problem is most of these stories were told by biographers after a lot of these stars were dead. These stars could never, vouch for what was being said. Some of it is true, some of it is not. But yeah, in terms of her relationship, I believe, some people have said that, it kind of come out when people were still alive that her relationship with the director was up and down. How up and down it was, if she said some of the stuff she said, that's debatable. That's debatable. Like, people wonder if the biographers were just saying that to sell books. She was no longer alive when some of these books come out, so she couldn't corroborate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite interesting actually. There is some weird trivia around this film that it just seems some people made up to sell books and stuff like that. A lot more so than any of the other films we've touched on so far, and probably any of the other films we will touch on, especially in the Universal Monster films. Yeah, it's just a really, really strange history, man. Yeah, I thought we're briefly touching it. Like I said, we won't spend too much on it because we don't really know if it's true or not. But in terms of Zeta's performance, my God, like, powerhouse, right?
I don't know. There's just something about the way she delivered every single line,
Yes.
and it was even if, you know what, I think I finally pegged it. It just came, it's not even her performance that feels dated. It's the pacing of some of the scenes. It's the pacing of the dialogue that makes it feel dated, not her.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It's
Like
that
on the
very,
couch.
yeah, it's the very
Yeah.
dramatic theater. It's where you're like really projecting to
Yeah. There you
camera,
go.
and you're really like projecting to the back of the room. When obviously on film you don't need to do it. Camera's right in your
Nope.
face.
Yep.
But yeah, obviously you get that in a lot of these films. I completely agree with you, man. I completely agree with you. Oddly enough, that actually brings us very nicely onto our next subject, because he
Alright.
done the complete opposite, which is Boris Karloff. Boris Karloff was known to be quite an imposing figure and had a very loud, booming voice. But as you see in this film, really tones it down, and really, it said that, strangely enough, we touch on the rumors of Zeta Johan's relationship with Cole Freund. The complete opposite is said about Boris Karloff and Cole Freund. They loved each other. Boris loved him. He loved Boris. It was a really, really good relationship. But everyone loved Boris Karloff. Boris Karloff was, everyone adored him, and
I have heard this.
he
Yep.
was such an intelligent actor, man. He was such an intelligent actor, and I feel his performance in this really, really shows that, because he's very quiet. He almost whispers some of those lines. He's very, yeah. How did it work for you? Like, coming off the back of Frankenstein, which you had seen a few times, but now seeing him
I'd
in
only seen
makeup.
Frankenstein once, but like this was. I mean, okay, so I don't have a lot of his work to go off of, just pretty much Frankenstein, I think. But the fact that he froze the upper three quarters of his face like entirely, almost as though he had Botox,
Yeah.
which, from what I understand, actually had something to do with the way the makeup worked and how
Yes.
hard it was and the way it dried.
Yeah.
But it lent this eerie, creepy, but you buy this person as real quality to him, and forced him to speak with just a slight lisp. But apparently you speak with just a slight lisp, and the entire upper portion of your head can just be frozen in no emotion. He manages to take all these fantastical brand new ideas and present them in such a fashion that you're like, yep, okay, might be a movie, but you're real. I buy this.
Yeah. I think that's the perfect way to sum it up. You buy him as the mummy. You
Yeah,
buy him
exactly.
as this
You
mystical
buy him as one
figure.
Ardith Bay.
Yes. Yes. Speaking of which, you just dropped Ardif Bay, and so when we were going to do this, you watched it. You asked me if I'd watched it yet. I said I hadn't done the rewatch yet. I was doing it in a couple of days, and then I'd be doing it again around Halloween.
Right.
You then introduced me to this drinking game you had come up with and said, try this out next time you watch it. So I will let you run with that and introduce that and tell our faithful listeners about your Ardif Bay drinking game.
All right. So if you're a person who likes to participate in alcoholic beverages, what you need is a shot glass and an alcohol of choice. Pick your strength carefully, because if you play this game properly, you're going to be taking in the neighborhood, I think, of 8 or 9 shots.
Yeah.
And the rules are very simple. Anytime somebody says Ardif Bay, you drink. And the only other rule is if somebody just says Ardif, you take half a shot. So if taking 9 shots of booze doesn't seem like a good idea, maybe grab a beer. But have a good time with it. You'll get messed up, but you'll remember the evening, I'm pretty sure.
Definitely. It's a great way to have a bit of fun with a classic horror film, especially if you've seen it before and you want a slightly new take on it, and a slightly new vantage point. So I want to bring it back around to the screenplay a little bit, because there's something quite interesting about this film. It's quite noticeable, but once it's pointed out, it's very noticeable. So essentially, the story of the structure of the screenplay they use in this film is exactly the same as Dracula. The screenwriter, John L. Balderston, I believe his name is, he didn't write the screenplay for Dracula. I believe he wrote the play that then the film was based on. He did then come on to do rights of Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein. He was asked to do the screenplays. It was originally a completely different Boris Karloff vehicle, and then the world was completely fascinated with the opening of King Tut's tomb. Universal wanted to make a mummy movie. Took them about 10 years to get it done, but here we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
funny sidebar. My mother actually was a security guard when she was
no way
in her early 20s when King Tut came through Chicago.
come through. Wow, that's pretty cool, man. That's really
Yeah.
cool. That's really, really cool. I've always had a very, very deep fascination with Egyptians and King Tut and stuff like that. So yeah,
I
that's
mean,
definitely
even
something
removing the pyramids from the conversation, they just have a fascinating culture.
Yes, very fascinating, very fascinating. Yeah, like really, really in-depth, complex history, man. Like just so much more than just the pyramids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, incredible stuff. Bringing it back around, he essentially just rewrites Dracula, and some of the scenes are exactly the same. Like exactly the same. The setup is exactly the same. The pendant that the mummy is scared of in this film is just a crucifix, and the Zeta Johan's character he's after is the female lead in Dracula. Like it's exactly the same setup, and then like the most outrageous to me.
She's way more memorable. I'm sorry. To me,
Oh, hell
not
yeah.
even.
Oh,
sorry,
this
not
whole
sorry.
film.
She is
This
way
whole film.
more memorable.
This whole film is more memorable. This film is. It's essentially the same setup, but for me, it's a much better film, and I think that is down to the actors. Definitely, I think Boris Karloff is a far superior actor to Bela Lugosi. I think the supporting cast are far superior. I think the stuff that really works about the look of Dracula is just brought into this film, and Carl Freund's then given a director's chair, so he has free reign to make it look how he wants.
I mean, hell, even though he's playing the exact same character, the doctor fella
Yes,
that's in both this and Dracula is more memorable even in this, even though it's
yes,
the
Edward.
same character.
Yeah, Edward Van Sloan, the actor who is Van Helsing in Dracula. He's also in Frankenstein as Dr. Waldman, and
Son of a biscuit.
and then he's in The Mummy as well as Dr. Muller. And
do I get more of this guy, or are we done with him for now?
No, we're done. We're basically done.
All right, fair enough.
I mean, he's in a lot. He's in a lot of stuff, but he turns up in terms of Universal properties. I think it's like one of the Mummy films he comes back in. I think he's in a Dracula film later down the line.
Since you said that real quick, one of the bits of trivia that I found really interesting was The Mummy is the only, in quote, franchise that doesn't have anything to do with the first film. Like the Mummy that we're talking about right now has absolutely nothing to do with the entirety of the rest of the Mummy movies that they made.
Yes. Yeah, it's a completely different Mummy. I can't remember the character's name in the sequels, but yeah, like the follow-up to this is a complete redoing. The Mummy's someone completely different, not played by Boris Karloff. I think that had something to do with it as well. I think Karloff wasn't returning for this, and most people didn't return. Jack Pierce returned for the makeup, but he done something very different. It doesn't look like the Karloff one. And also you can't repeat the Karloff look for Frankenstein or the Mummy in these earlier films, because at this time Karloff was like a struggling actor when he was picked up for Frankenstein, right? So he was as skinny as anything. That's why that Frankenstein makeup works, and that's why the Mummy makeup works, because he's as skinny as hell. Actually, it still works in Bride.
He's 1930s Doug Jones.
Yeah, essentially. But then when he goes on and plays Frankenstein a little bit more, even when it is Jack Pierce doing the makeup and they've still got that classic look, it does look different. It doesn't look exactly right because, Karloff can actually afford food at this point. So Karloff's eating at this point. So it does look a little more filled out, and it doesn't have that same look. But yeah, it was a very unique frame of time where they had Jack Pierce at his absolute height, and they got to, they had an actor in Karloff who was as skinny as hell, but would put up with the torture and really go for it, man. And I think, again, like, I know I keep touching on it, but for me, that is the out and out champion of this film, is just that makeup. That makeup is just absolutely legendary. And like you said, it was a really, really painful process. And you're saying about not moving his face when he's Ardeth Bay and he's got that really, really wrinkly skin. The way that was achieved is essentially they put a glue-like substance on the skin. They then stretch your face back, put cotton on top of it, paint over the top of the cotton with,
this
back
doesn't
in
sound
the day,
uncomfortable at all.
probably spirit gum. No. They then dry it with a hairdryer, and then they release it. So let your skin go back, and then obviously, as you can imagine, it wrinkles all up. Amazing thing.
It probably feels wonderful too.
Yes. So, back in the day with those materials, horrible, absolutely horrible. The great thing about that technique is Jack Pierce invented that technique. As far as I know, Jack Pierce invented that technique. He's definitely the first person in Hollywood to really apply it on this scale. That technique is still used today, obviously with much better materials, and it's a lot more comfortable for the actors. But if you watch any of the work K&B Effects do in The Walking Dead, or some of the stuff Tom Savini done in, Dawn of the Dead and films like that, the way they achieve that wrinkled skin on the zombies, it's the Jack Pierce way, man. Yeah, like that.
It is.
Yeah, they still do it, man. Like, he is literally, for me, he's the greatest makeup artist of all time. And most of these monsters we're covering, man, they're his creations. And they really are his creations. Like, Frankenstein does not look
like
the way it should
from
look.
concept to where it is it was all him always.
Yeah, with Boris Karloff, it said that Karloff had like a lot of input, and then, like I touched on in the Frankenstein one, James Wow said that he had sketches of it, but most people are kind of agreed it was Jack Pierce.
Okay.
And these makeup techniques didn't exist. He was inventing them on the spot. He was working out ways to, people had done stuff before, like Lon Chaney Senior had done some amazing stuff before, like his Phantom of the Opera and stuff like that. But up until this point, no one was doing the stuff Jack Pierce was doing. And unfortunately, the sad reality is that the way Jack Pierce would do stuff is it would all be applied on the day, every day. He wasn't doing masks. He wasn't doing anything like that. He was applying to your skin. He was taking the time. It's a very long process. Some actors didn't like it. People like Boris Karloff did, despite the pain that it put Boris Karloff through. He was said to kind of like the pain a little bit as the
well, like in a Daniel Day-Lewis, like it adds to that shit way.
Yes,
I don't know. That's how I've always seen that kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely does. The reality is, though, with Jack Pierce, the sad reality, man, is some of these later films, he ended up getting replaced because Universal wanted to do it cheaper and they wanted to do it quicker, and he wasn't the guy to do it. So yeah, he got fired, he got let go by Universal. He done some TV work, I think, some stuff like that. And then really sadly, when Jack Pierce died in the 60s, I believe, he was virtually unknown. Like no one. It said,
like all great artists.
well,
Damn
it said that at Jack Pierce's funeral, there was about 3 or 4 people in attendance.
The fuck?
That was it. Yeah. He wasn't. It wasn't until.
He better be partying it up in heaven.
Well, until like people started rediscovering these films, and then you had directors that were coming up that were really influenced by the Universal monsters, and then like, hey, how did you create them? And then magazines like Fangoria, Famous Monsters, really pointing out these makeups and who done them.
Dude, on the red carpet a couple of years ago at Shriekfest, I'm having a random ass conversation with this old fella, and I'm like, this is awesome. I'm surrounded by Hollywood types. I'm in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And then he's like, yeah, so when I created Fangoria, I went, pause. What did you just say? He was the dude who created Fangoria.
It's pretty
and
cool.
I was like, dude, can I hug you? And it was like, he was like a little uncomfortable. He's like, but yeah. And I was like, dude, thank you so much.
Yeah, that's pretty
Like,
cool.
oh my God. Anyway, we'll talk about it some other time. But shit, that was so awesome. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, definitely, man. Definitely. Yeah, definitely give that a shout out. How can you not? But yeah, I mean, what is that guy and magazines like that and Famous Monsters that then put people like Jack Pierce and his monster creations in the spotlight, and rightfully so. So one of the questions I did want to ask you was, why did you go back and watch this 4 or 5 times?
I tried to watch it 5 times, so I wound up being 4. That's a story.
It ended up being 4. Sorry, 4 times. 4 times.
No, I'm just saying that's a story for another time. But honestly, a lot of it had to do with the camera work, and interestingly, I noticed even more of the camera work upon doing research and compiling notes while leaving it on in the background. And so basically, to sort of describe my setup, like I've got my notes directly in front of me, down like on the table, desk style, and then just in front of me there's a monitor of my computer that I'm doing research on, and just behind that monitor I've got a television that was hooked up to my Xbox, and I was watching it, The Mummy, on an app. So as I'm doing everything, like the imagery is just sort of passive, and I'm noticing even more subtle camera work, like slow push zooms on conversations to have camera movement that most people aren't even going to notice, that I didn't notice the first 3 damn times, and I only noticed because I wasn't really looking, and I went, what, is the camera moving?
Yeah.
And I hope all that made sense. But yeah, just I don't know, man. I was just, so much of the filmmaking of the era that I was only passingly familiar with is just, it's why why I'm okay spending as much time doing these things as I am, because like if I didn't care for them, I would only do it the once or twice and then do the research and be done with it.
Yeah, I've gone back multiple times over the years, from when I first discovered them to, just every Halloween I watch a couple of these films, and
And the other reason that I'm so cool with it is because now I've seen them, enough times in a incredibly short period of time, that from this point forward on during the Halloween season, I'll just throw them on while doing stuff.
yes, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's sometimes a really, really great way to watch horror films in general. I find is, I think that's why we all love horror. Is you can throw it on and really get immersed in it, and sometimes it's just nice to have on in the background.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's something that you can occasionally go to. Yeah, it's strange like that, horror, isn't it? Because you wouldn't think horror was kind of this safety blanket, this nice warm place to go. But yeah, it is. It really
we
is.
can get deep and psychological about it because that stuff fascinates me. We won't, but
Same.
there are reasons. There are reasons that humans like horror.
Of course there are. So, what else stood out to you? Anything that you learned from behind the scenes that you really want to like throw out there?
Well, just if you're the type of person who might plan a vacation in the future when such things are allowed again, because there's a movie you like and it was filmed there, there are locations in Southern California that still exist and are still almost identical for the Mummy, unlike a lot of the Universal classics that were shot entirely on sound stages and whatnot. And they're all in and around Southern California. One of my bits of research is I watched a fella who is as into cinema as we are, and he made a little like I'm gonna go hiking with my buddy into the locations of the 1932 Mummy, and it was pretty fascinating. We'll drop it in the links. It was a YouTube thing. And
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, send the links over. I'd love to watch that myself.
Well, something I took a note on 3 times. The first 3 times I watched it was I can't stress enough how much I love that sound, because it's early on in sound cinema. There's a lot of sound design where there are sounds that now you'd be like, of course that them putting down a glass on a table is heard, but yeah, but that like at the time it was still they had to like, hey everybody, remember we need that sound when the mummy is awakened. The thing that gets everything going, where any movie you would expect there to be a swell of music to make you go, oh no, look what he's doing, something bad is happening. There is absolutely no sound. He opens a box, he unrolls a scroll, and he laughs while looking at it. There is no sound. And I was just like, yes, oh my god, thank you. Because
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to get weird about it, like if it was real, like if you were actually opening something that you shouldn't be opening, there's not going to be some strange swell of music, because you'd be like, where the fuck is that music coming from? I'm not going to open this box.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Like,
I did.
it's
The
just
only
dead
thing
ass
I did
silent.
think of when that happened was, I like that there's no score to it, or no real sound design to it. But the only thing that got me is like when he opens the box, it is the most simple sound of him opening. Like you expect some like air coming out of it. This thing
Right?
hasn't been opened in like thousands of years,
There should
and
be
he's
like or
yeah,
something.
no,
Yeah.
literally just removes the lid, and it's good to go. But yeah, I thought that was really funny. Oddly enough, you talking about that opening scene actually brings me to something I did want to speak about, because I find this quite fascinating. I think this is a good lesson to be very careful about what you read sometimes. So I was saying about the trivia around this, the behind the scenes, the rumors, the stuff that some people say is real, some people say isn't real. You just don't really know with a lot of these films. Oddly enough, one of we all get trivia from a lot of places. Probably the main place anyone gets trivia, right, for a film is IMDb. Trivia
Well,
section,
yeah.
loads of stuff. Great, right? You would hope that everything you read on IMDb is real. True fact
Until
is
you
that
realize that anybody can edit
anyone
that
could
like
put it in.
Wikipedia.
So one of the things I find very interesting is there are quite a few trivia comments on the trivia section of the Mummy that are obviously wrote by the same person, where he or she is talking about the makeup, and they are saying that it was absolutely pointless for Boris Karloff to be in the Mummy makeup because
Oh, I
he.
did.
Do you
Yeah,
know what
no,
I'm on
I'm
about?
sorry. I did not mean to cut. Well, I read what you're on about, and I did not note it as interesting, because I'm like, what?
The
But yes,
about
I absolutely read this.
the wooden dummy.
Yeah.
Right. So that's not true, like at all. So like when I read this, I was like, what? Like that? I'm pretty sure that's not true. Like, but I don't know. Maybe it is.
It didn't
Maybe
sound accurate, which is why
no.
I didn't
Right.
note it.
Exactly.
Okay.
That was
All
the thing.
right.
I was like, I'm pretty sure in none of the interviews I've seen, like the interviews with people that work with Jack Pierce, or the interviews with Boris Karloff's daughter, or any of these people that pop up in the documentaries and stuff over the years, I've never heard this. This has never been like there's a wooden dummy involved and Boris Karloff wasn't used for those scenes. It is definitely true that Boris Karloff was completely made up head to toe in, like you said, process that took 8+ hours.
Yeah.
And
fucking intense. I don't care who.
And they
did it.
hardly shot. They hardly shot any of it. Really.
Think
It
about that. You got to go to
was-
you got to go through a whole day's work before you go to work.
Yes, exactly. But this trivia, these comments about there being a wooden dummy in the casket, and Boris Karloff is only used for the shot where his eyes open.
Right.
I'm gonna go on record and say that is completely false. And I would love for the person that wrote that comment to discover this podcast and tell
yes,
me
please.
where they have got that information from. And look,
Cite your
I
precedent,
will
sirs,
hold my
and or
hands
madam.
up and say, I will hold my hands up and say I am completely wrong. If you can prove to me there is a, but from everything I have seen, there are set photos of Boris Karloff in the casket. There are the stories about the way he was made up for 8+ hours by Jack Pierce, and when he got on set, he was put in his casket and he had to stand there the whole time in his casket. And then Cole Freund was very, very restrained in the way that he filmed him, and no one expected him to be filmed the way he was. That is all multiple sources. I've seen people say this, and it's in multiple books and stuff like that. The wooden dummy, no idea where that's come from. So I just wanted to bring that up. It could be true. If the person that wrote that ever does discover this podcast, please let us know where you got that from, because
Come at us, bro. Sorry.
well, and even if that's if that's true, that's really interesting.
It
But
is.
I also find it very weird that Jack Pierce would make up a wooden doll that looks exactly like Boris Karloff and has the same bone structure as Boris Karloff. Like, really? Like, they took the time to carve a wooden dummy that looked exactly like Boris Karloff and had his jaw structure? I don't think it's real. I've got to be honest.
Uh-huh.
I had done some extra research afterwards to be like, okay, there's something I didn't know. Was there a wooden dummy? Couldn't find anything like that. I'm going to say it's bullshit. So yeah, definitely, if you ever do discover this podcast, please tell me I'm wrong. But yeah, just a little note, boys and girls: be careful what you read sometimes, because there are people on the internet that do like to write shit. And
Don't take everything with a grain of salt. Assume
Yes.
that it's been hit over the head with a salt brick.
I do find that funny though. But I did want to bring that up because that's the first time on this podcast anyway that I've come across some trivia. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's not true. I'm
right?
pretty sure.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm pretty sure that's bullshit. But yeah, that's where I'm gonna leave the trivia. Is there anything else you want to touch on, sir?
Well, one of the bits of trivia I found really kind of comically interesting is that the opening music is the exact same movement of Swan Lake that they used to open Dracula.
So really weirdly, on that note, I'm really glad you brought this up actually. I guess at the time, Universal either could use that arrangement for nothing, or they could use it very cheap, or they paid a lot of money for it and they were gonna get their money out of it. Because within like a 2-3 year period, they actually used that as the opening of a lot of horror films. Like
Did
most famously Dracula and The Mummy. I believe they also used it for, I can't remember what the film's called. So something in the Rue Morgue.
Murders in the Rue Morgue.
Yeah, that's it. Murders in the Rue Morgue. They used it for
That's
that.
one of those. I haven't seen it, but I happen to know it.
Yes.
Anyway,
There you go. They used it for a couple. So yeah, I guess they, I don't know, maybe paid a lot of money to use it, or didn't have to pay anything to use it. I'm not really sure, but yeah, I'm glad you brought it up actually, because that is quite. You do see that quite a lot. They're quite with a lot of these early films, they can be quite cheap in areas and reuse stuff. There's actually in one of the Mummy sequels, if you ever venture off and watch some of the others, despite you being absolutely correct before, that the mummy in this Imhotep is not the mummy in the other films. In one of those other films, they basically tell the exact same backstory that they tell in this, so much so that they completely reuse footage from this film. It's so weird when you watch it, man, because the shots do match up. It's quite well done, but you've already seen this with Boris Karloff on the flip side when you see the face, right? But in these other films, it's a completely different guy. But yeah, they do that a lot. They do it in a lot of the early gangster films of the time as well and stuff like that. But yeah, they can get quite cheap and overuse stuff, really.
well, I mean, there's something to be said for using stuff again and again, but I don't know. Try to be a little self-aware about it. In as much as I don't know how much of a trauma fan you are. Are you a trauma
Oh
fan?
yeah, yeah.
You know the trauma car flip.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
come
yeah,
on, come
yeah.
on,
Of
the trauma
course.
car flip.
Yeah, yeah.
If you
Of
don't know
course.
what I'm talking about, look up the trauma car flip. It's funny. It's a meme. It's a shot that they've used in almost every movie since they shot it in the 80s.
I think that's a great place to end it for us this week, man. I'm so glad you enjoyed this one. This is
Oh my god, yeah.
it's a very interesting film because, like I said, it is basically Dracula completely retold, but better in every way, in my opinion. And again, for me, obviously, everyone knows I'm a huge Boris Karloff fan, but that Jack Pierce makeup, oh my god, that Jack Pierce makeup is absolutely incredible. So yeah, dude, it's been a good one. Thank you so much for joining me. Looking forward to. I'm glad we're back on track. Thank you so much, everyone out there, for listening once again. And until
Seriously,
next week,
the
Horror
fact
House.
that anybody puts up with us is like, thank you.
Yeah, it's like incredible, right? Just like me and you going off for an hour on classic horror. But yeah, some people like it, and that's pretty cool. But yeah, until next week, Horror Hounds, stay safe.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.